The warning lights flashed red across the control panel of the small repair station. Jaiwin looked up from his work, wiping grease from his hands with an old cloth. Something big was coming to the neutral zone, and it was coming fast. His daughter Hannah ran into the workshop, her eyes wide with excitement. She pressed her face against the viewing window, trying to see what was approaching. The 12-year-old girl had spent her entire life on this station with her father, and she knew the difference between regular traffic and something unusual. "Papa, what kind of ship is that?" Hannah asked, pointing at the growing shadow in space. Jaiwin joined her at the window and felt his breath catch in his throat. The ship was massive, easily 10 times the size of any vessel that had ever docked at their small station. Its hull was dark metal that seemed to shimmer with an inner fire, and even from a distance, he could see the damage. Sections of the armor were torn open, exposing the interior. Scorch marks covered the sides, and one of the main engines was barely functioning. "That's a Dragon warship," Jaiwin said quietly. His hand instinctively moved to rest on his daughter's shoulder, a protective gesture he didn't even realize he was making. Hannah had heard stories about dragons. Everyone in the galaxy had. They were ancient creatures, proud and powerful, with technology that predated most civilizations. Dragons rarely spoke to other species, and they certainly never asked for help. They were warriors who had fought in wars that lasted centuries, and their reputation was fearsome. The communication system crackled to life. A deep voice, commanding and cold, filled the workshop. "Human repair station. This is the warship Eternal Flame. We require immediate repairs. Prepare your docking bay." It wasn't a request. It was an order. Jaiwin hesitated for just a moment. His station was small, designed for cargo haulers and transport ships. He had never worked on a military vessel, let alone a Dragon warship. But he also knew that refusing would be dangerous, and the credits from such a job would keep his station running for months. "Acknowledge, Eternal Flame," Jaiwin replied, keeping his voice steady. "Docking bay is ready. I'll do what I can." The massive ship slowly maneuvered into position, its damaged engine sputtering. As it drew closer, Hannah could see more details. The hull wasn't just metal. It seemed alive somehow, with patterns that looked like scales. The ship settled into the docking bay with a heavy thud that shook the entire station. Jaiwin told Hannah to stay in the workshop while he went to meet the crew. She nodded obediently, but her curious nature was already making plans. She watched through the window as the airlock opened and figures emerged from the Dragon ship. The first thing that struck Jaiwin was their size. The dragons in their natural form were enormous, with wings that scraped the ceiling of his docking bay. Their scales shimmered in colors of deep purple and gold, and their eyes glowed with an inner light. But most of the crew had shifted into smaller, more humanoid forms to move through the station's corridors. Even in this form, they towered over Jaiwin, and their presence was intimidating. The leader stepped forward. She was taller than the others, with scales that seemed darker, almost black in some lights, but catching hints of deep blue and silver in others. Her eyes were golden, ancient, and calculating. She wore armor that looked ceremonial but was clearly functional, with symbols etched into the metal that Jaiwin didn't recognize. "I am Queen Myri," she said, her voice carrying the weight of authority. "Commander of the Eastern Fleet. This ship was damaged in combat with pirates 3 days ago. We need full repairs to the hull, the primary engine, and the weapon systems." Jaiwin tried not to show his nervousness. "I'm Jaiwin, Master Mechanic. I'll need to assess the damage first, but I'll do everything I can. May I board your ship to inspect the systems?" Queen Myri studied him for a long moment, as if deciding whether human was even capable of understanding dragon technology. Finally, she nodded. "You may, but touch nothing without permission. My crew will watch your every move." As Jaiwin boarded the warship, he was amazed by what he saw. The interior was beautiful in a harsh, functional way. Everything was designed for efficiency and power, but there were also traces of artistry in the metal work, in the way the corridors curved, in the symbols carved into the walls. This was a ship built by a culture that valued both strength and beauty. 2 dragon guards followed him everywhere, their eyes never leaving him. Jaiwin worked carefully, using his diagnostic tools to scan the damaged systems. The technology was far more advanced than anything humans had created, but the basic principles were similar. Engines needed fuel and proper cooling. Hull breaches needed to be sealed. Weapons needed power conduits. Back in the workshop, Hannah was supposed to be studying her lessons on the computer. Instead, she was watching the Dragon ship through every camera angle she could access. She saw her father moving through the corridors with the guards behind him. She saw other dragons moving about their duties, their faces serious and tired. Then she saw something that caught her attention. Through one camera, she glimpsed a large chamber, probably the captain's quarters. Inside, alone, sat Queen Myri. The dragon queen had removed her armor and sat in her true form, massive wings folded against her back. She was staring at a holographic display showing star charts, but her expression was sad. Hannah recognized that look because she had seen it on her father's face sometimes. Late at night, when he thought she was asleep, it was loneliness. Hours passed as Jaiwin worked. The damage was extensive, but not impossible to repair. He explained to Queen Myri what needed to be done, how long it would take, and what materials he would need. The queen listened carefully, occasionally asking questions that revealed she understood the technical details better than most engineers Jaiwin had met. "You are skilled for a human," Queen Myri said, and it might have been meant as a compliment, though her tone remained cold. "How long have your people been working with starship technology?" "Only about 200 years, Jaiwin admitted. "We're still learning, but we're good at adapting and improving what we find." 200 years, the queen repeated, a hint of something like amusement in her voice. "My people have been building ships for over 10,000 years. Yet you have managed to gain acceptance into the Galactic Coalition in such a short time. Interesting." That evening, after Jaiwin returned to the workshop exhausted, Hannah helped him eat a simple meal. She wanted to ask him about the dragons, about the ship, about the queen, but she could see how tired her father was. So she waited. Later, when Jaiwin thought Hannah was asleep in her small room, she crept back to the workshop. She accessed the station's computer and began searching through the databases. She wanted to learn about dragons, about their culture, about who they really were beneath their fearsome reputation. What she found surprised her. Dragons were ancient, yes, and powerful warriors. But they hadn't always been just warriors. There were old records, thousands of years old, that showed dragon festivals and celebrations. They had art and music and traditions. But at some point, all of that had stopped. The records became only about battles and conquests and survival. Hannah kept reading, following links from one document to another. Then she found something specific. A note in an old cultural database mentioned that dragons traditionally celebrated their hatching days, similar to human birthdays. But the entry was marked as obsolete, a practice abandoned during something called the Great War. She checked the calendar against the ship's registration. The Eternal Flame had been commissioned exactly 3,000 years ago on this date. And according to dragon custom, warships were often commissioned on their captain's hatching day. Tomorrow was Queen Myri's birthday, and Hannah suspected that no one, not even the Queen's own crew, would acknowledge it. Hannah woke early the next morning with a plan forming in her mind. She found her father in the workshop, already preparing tools for another day of work on the dragon warship. The repairs were going well, but they would take at least 3 more days to complete. "Papa," Hannah said, trying to sound casual as she poured herself a cup of water, "do dragons celebrate birthdays?" Jaiwin looked up from his toolbox, surprised by the question. "Birthdays? I'm not sure. Why do you ask?" "I was reading about dragon culture last night." Hannah explained. "They used to celebrate hatching days a long time ago, but they stopped. I was wondering why." Her father sat down at the small table and gestured for her to join him. "Many warrior cultures give up celebrations when life becomes only about survival," he said thoughtfully. "When you're always fighting, always worried about the next battle, there's no time or energy for joy. It's sad, really." "But humans celebrate birthdays even when things are hard," Hannah pointed out. "You made me a cake last year, even though the station almost didn't have enough credits to buy supplies." Jaiwin smiled at the memory. "That's because birthdays are important. They remind us that we're glad someone exists." Your mother always said that everyone deserves at least one day a year when people celebrate that they were born. His expression grew distant for a moment, remembering his wife who had died when Hannah was very young. Hannah took a deep breath. Papa, I think today is Queen Myri's hatching day. What? Jaiwan looked shocked. How do you know that? I checked the ship's records. The Eternal Flame was commissioned 3,000 years ago today, and dragon captains usually commission their ships on their hatching day. It's tradition, or it was tradition. Hannah leaned forward earnestly. Papa, I want to make her a cake. Jaiwan immediately began shaking his head. Hannah, no. Dragons are proud. They might see it as an insult or think we're mocking their old customs. Queen Myri could take offense. Or, Hannah said quietly, she might be happy that someone remembered. Everyone deserves a birthday, Papa. Even dragon queens who pretend they don't need anything. Her father looked at his daughter's determined face and sighed. He recognized that expression. It was the same stubborn determination his wife had possessed, the same refusal to ignore someone in need. If you do this, you have to be very careful. Dragons don't show emotion the way we do. She might not react the way you expect. I know, Hannah said, but I still want to try. The problem was that their station had limited supplies. They lived simply with ration packs and synthesized food that was nutritious but bland. Making a real cake will require creativity and careful use of their precious ingredients. Hannah spent the morning going through their storage lockers. She found a small container of synthesized flour that her father had been saving for a special occasion. There was sugar, though not much, some dehydrated eggs that could be reconstituted, artificial vanilla flavoring. It wasn't much, but Hannah had watched enough cooking videos on the station's database to know the basics. While her father worked on the dragon ship, Hannah began her project. She mixed the flour with water and the reconstituted eggs, adding sugar carefully. The station's small oven was designed for heating ration packs, but she thought she could make it work for baking. The first attempt was a disaster. The cake came out flat and burned on the edges. Hannah stared at it in frustration, then threw it away and started again. She adjusted the temperature and the timing, working with the precision she had learned from watching her father repair complicated machinery. The second attempt was better, but still not right. The texture was wrong, too dense. Hannah sat on the floor of their small kitchen area, surrounded by mixing bowls and measuring cups, feeling discouraged. But then she remembered something. Dragons preferred heat. They breathed fire. Their food was probably different from human food. She accessed the station's database again and searched for information about dragon dietary preferences. The information was limited, but she found references to thermal spices, ingredients that created a warming sensation. The station had some basic spices for flavoring ration packs. Hannah added them carefully to her next batch, along with a touch of pepper and something called fire root that was used in emergency heating packs. The third attempt looked promising. The cake rose properly and had a golden color. When Hannah tested a small piece, it had a pleasant warmth that spread through her mouth without being painful. It might actually work. Now she needed to decorate it. Humans usually use frosting, but Hannah didn't have the ingredients for that. Instead, she got creative. She had access to edible metal flakes that were sometimes used to mark food containers. They were safe to eat and would shimmer like dragon scales. She arranged them on top of the cake in patterns that resembled the star charts she had seen in dragon ship corridors. As she worked, Jaiwan returned from the warship for a lunch break. He stopped in the doorway, staring at what his daughter had created. The cake wasn't perfect by professional standards, but it was made with care and creativity. It looked special. You really did it, he said softly. Do you think she'll like it? Hannah asked, suddenly nervous. I think, Jaiwan said carefully, that it's the thought that matters. But Hannah, you need to understand something. Queen Myri has lived for 3,000 years. She's seen civilizations rise and fall. She's fought in wars we can't imagine. A simple cake might not mean anything to someone who has experienced so much. It will mean something, Hannah insisted, because nobody else is going to give her one. Nobody else even remembers it's her birthday. That afternoon, Jaiwan returned to the dragon warship to continue the repairs. Queen Myri met him in the main engine room, observing as he worked on reconnecting power conduits. The damage had been extensive, but Jaiwin's modifications were actually improving the ship's efficiency. "You have made changes to the original design," Queen Myri observed. Her tone was neutral, but Jaiwin couldn't tell if she was pleased or annoyed. "Yes, Your Majesty," Jaiwin admitted. "I hope that's acceptable." The original configuration was excellent, but there were some places where the energy flow could be optimized. These modifications should give you about 8% more power efficiency. Queen Myri studied the work carefully, her golden eyes taking in every detail. "Interesting. In 10,000 years of dragon engineering, we perfected these designs. Yet you, a human who has only known space travel for 2 centuries, found improvements. It's not that our way is better," Jaiwin explained. "It's just different. Dragons build things to last forever, to be powerful and enduring. Humans build things knowing they might break. So we learn to adapt and modify. We weren't born strong like your people, so we had to become clever instead." "Clever," the Queen repeated, as if tasting the word. "Is that how humans have survived? By being clever?" "That, and by taking care of each other," Jaiwin said. He was installing the last power coupling and spoke without really thinking about his words. "We survive because we remember to live, not just to fight. We celebrate small victories. We mark important days. We remember that life is worth living, not just preserving." Queen Myri was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was colder than before. "You speak of weakness. Celebration and sentiment are luxury for those who have the privilege of peace. My people have been at war for 3,000 years. We cannot afford such softness. Is it really soft to remember why you're fighting?" Jaiwin asked quietly. Then, realizing he might have said too much, he quickly added, "Forgive me, Your Majesty. I spoke out of turn." The Queen stared at him with those ancient golden eyes, and Jaiwin couldn't read her expression. Finally, she turned away. "Complete your work, human. We depart in 2 days." As Jaiwin left the ship that evening, he felt troubled. He told Hannah about the conversation, about how the Queen had reacted to his words about celebration and life. "I don't think she wants to be reminded of what her people gave up," he said. But Hannah only held the cake she had made more carefully. "Then she needs to be reminded even more," the young girl said. "Tomorrow morning, before they leave, I'm going to give this to her. And Papa, I need you to trust me." Jaiwin looked at his daughter, seeing the determination in her eyes, the same fierce kindness that had defined her mother. He knew he couldn't stop her, and perhaps he shouldn't try. "All right," he said finally, "but I'm coming with you." The morning arrived with a quiet tension that filled the repair station. Jaiwin had barely slept, worried about what might happen when his daughter approached the Dragon Queen with her gift. Hannah, however, seemed calm. She had wrapped the cake carefully in a preservation container, the kind used to keep food fresh in space travel. Through the transparent lid, the edible metal flakes sparkled like stars. "Remember," Jaiwin told his daughter as they prepared to board the Dragon warship, "be respectful. If she seems angry, we leave immediately. Don't argue with her." "I won't argue," Hannah promised. "I'm just giving her a cake, Papa. That's all." The repairs were complete. Jaiwin had worked through most of the night to finish the last modifications to the weapon systems. The Eternal Flame was ready to depart, possibly within the next few hours. If Hannah was going to do this, it had to be now. They crossed through the docking tunnel into the Dragon warship. The corridors were busy with crew members preparing for departure. Dragons in their humanoid forms moved past them carrying supplies and equipment. A few glanced at the humans with curiosity, but most ignored them entirely. 2 guards stood at the entrance to the main corridor. They were massive even in their smaller forms, with scales that gleamed like polished bronze. When they saw Jaiwin and Hannah approaching, they crossed their spears to block the path. "The repairs are complete," one guard said. "You should return to your station. We will be departing soon." "I need to speak with Queen Myri," Hannah said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. She held up the container with the cake. "I have something for her." The guards looked at each other, then at the small human child standing before them with a food container. "The Queen does not accept gift from lesser species," the second guard said, though his tone was not unkind. "Return to your station, child." "Please," Hannah insisted. "It's important. It will only take a moment." "The answer is no," the first guard said firmly. "Now leave before we escort you out." Hannah felt frustration building in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. She thought about what her father had taught her about dealing with difficult situations. Sometimes you had to find another way around the problem. "Then can you at least tell Queen Myri that the mechanic's daughter wishes to speak with her about the repairs? There's a technical matter about the modifications my father made." This was partly true. Jaiwin had made modifications, and Hannah did want to speak with the Queen. The guards looked uncertain. They exchanged glances again, having a silent conversation that Hannah couldn't understand. Finally, the first guard spoke into a communication device attached to his armor. After a moment, he looked surprised. "The Queen says she will see the child, but only for 1 minute, and the mechanic must accompany her." Jaiwin squeezed his daughter's shoulder gently as they were led deeper into the ship. They passed through corridors decorated with symbols and battle honors. The ship was beautiful in a harsh way, every surface polished and purposeful. Finally, they reached a large door that slid open to reveal the command chamber. Queen Myri sat on a throne-like chair at the center of the room, studying holographic displays that showed star maps and navigation routes. She was in her humanoid form but still towered over them, her presence filling the entire chamber. Her dark scales caught the light from the displays, creating patterns that shifted like shadows. "You requested to speak with me about technical matters," the Queen said without looking away from her displays. "What is it?" Hannah stepped forward, holding the container carefully in both hands. Her father had taught her that presenting something with both hands was a sign of respect in many cultures, including dragon culture. "Your Majesty, there's no technical problem. I apologize for the deception. I came because I have something for you." Now, Queen Myri did look at her. Those golden eyes focused on Hannah with an intensity that would have made most adults step back. But Hannah stood her ground, though her hands trembled slightly. "A gift?" The Queen's tone was impossible to read. "And what could a human child possibly have that would interest me?" "Today is your hatching day," Hannah said simply. "I made you a birthday cake." The command chamber fell completely silent. The few Dragon crew members who were present stopped what they were doing and stared. Even the holographic displays seemed to dim. Queen Myri's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or anger. "How do you know this?" the Queen asked quietly, dangerously. "I looked at the ship's records," Hannah admitted. "The Eternal Flame was commissioned 3,000 years ago today. I read that dragon captains traditionally commission their ships on their hatching days. And I learned that dragons used to celebrate these days a long time ago, before the wars." Queen Myri rose from her throne. She seemed to grow larger, more imposing. The guards tensed, ready to intervene if their queen commanded it. Jaiwin moved closer to his daughter, protective but not pulling her away. "You presume much, human child," Queen Myri said. Her voice was controlled, but there was something underneath it, something that might have been pain. "You know nothing of my people or our history. We abandoned such frivolous customs because we evolved beyond them. We became what we needed to be." "I know," Hannah said softly. "My father explained that warrior cultures give up celebrations when survival becomes everything. But he also taught me that humans always celebrate birthdays, even when things are hard, because everyone deserves at least one day when people are happy they exist." She held out the container, offering it with both hands. Among humans, birthdays aren't about being frivolous. They're about saying, "I'm glad you were born. I'm glad you exist. And I think everyone deserves to hear that, Your Majesty, even dragon queens." For a long moment, Queen Myri simply stared at the cake. The silence stretched until it became almost unbearable. Then, slowly, something extraordinary happened. The Queen's form began to shift. Her humanoid shape grew smaller, more vulnerable. She wasn't transforming into her full dragon form, but into something in between, something that looked almost fragile. The queen reached out with hands that trembled slightly and took the container from Hannah. She opened it carefully, looking at the simple cake with scattered metal flakes that sparkled like dragon scales. Her golden eyes traced the star patterns Hannah had created. 3,000 years, Queen Myri whispered. Her voice had changed, become softer, almost breaking. 3,000 years since anyone acknowledged the day I hatched. 3,000 years of battles and duty and survival. Then, to the shock of everyone in the command chamber, a crystalline tear rolled down the Dragon Queen's scaled cheek. Then another. Queen Myri, who had commanded fleets and conquered worlds, who was known across the galaxy as an unbreakable warrior, was crying. No one, the queen said, her voice raw with emotion, has celebrated my birth since the Great War began. I hatched on a battlefield. Hannah, my mother laid her eggs while fighting, and I emerged into a world of fire and death. From my first breath, I was a weapon, a soldier, never just a living being worthy of celebration. She looked down at the small human girl, who had somehow seen past the armor and the reputation to the truth underneath. In 3,000 years, I have won countless victories. I have been honored and feared, but I have never been celebrated simply for existing. Not once. Hannah felt tears in her own eyes now. She hadn't expected this, hadn't imagined that the fearsome Dragon Queen could be so lonely. Everyone deserves a birthday, she said again, her voice gentle. Even you, your majesty, especially you. Queen Myri carefully set the cake on a nearby table. Then she did something unprecedented. She knelt down, bringing herself to Hannah's eye level. The guards gasped. Dragons never knelt before other species. It was unheard of. You are a strange child, the queen said, but her tone was warm now, almost affectionate, brave and foolish in equal measure. You approached the Dragon Queen who could destroy your entire station with a thought, carrying a cake and speaking of joy. She reached out and gently touched Hannah's cheek with one scale finger. Thank you. Those are words I have not spoken genuinely in longer than you can imagine. The queen stood and turned to her crew, who were still frozen in shock at what they had witnessed. Clear the command chamber, she ordered. All of you, except the mechanic and his daughter. Her tone left no room for argument. When they were alone, Queen Myri looked at Jaiwin. Your daughter has reminded me of something I thought lost forever. Tell me, mechanic, what do humans do with birthday cakes besides admire them? Jaiwin stepped forward, feeling the weight of the moment. A dragon queen was asking him about birthday traditions. Something so human and simple that it seemed almost absurd in this massive warship surrounded by technology that could level planets. Well, your majesty, he began carefully, humans put candles on the cake. We light them, and then the person makes a wish. Something they hope for, something they want to come true. Then they blow out the candles, and if they blow them all out in one breath, the wish might come true. Queen Myri looked at the cake again, her golden eyes thoughtful. A wish. I have not made a wish in 3,000 years. Warriors do not wish for things. We take them or we do without. Maybe that's a problem, Hannah said quietly. Everyone looked at her. She felt nervous speaking so boldly to Queen, but something told her this was important. Maybe if you never let yourself wish for things, you forget what you're fighting for. The Queen was silent for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she laughed. It was a sound that seemed rusty, as if she had not laughed in centuries. You are wise beyond your years. Small one. Very well. Show me how this is done. Hannah looked around the command chamber. They didn't have candles, of course. The station used electric lights for everything. But then she had an idea. Your Majesty, can you create small flames? Dragons breathe fire, right? Queen Myri raised one scaled eyebrow. You want me to create fire for candles that do not exist? Not for candles, Hannah explained. We can use your fire instead. Just small flames, arranged on the cake like candles would be. Then you can make your wish and blow them out. A smile, small but genuine, crossed the Queen's face. Creative. I like it. She gestured with her hand, and suddenly small flames appeared, hovering just above the cake's surface. They danced and flickered like real candles, warm and golden. The metal flakes on the cake reflected the light, making the whole thing glow. "Now," Hannah instructed, "you have to close your eyes and make a wish. But you can't tell anyone what it is, or it won't come true." Queen Myri looked at the flames, at the cake this child had made for her, at the two humans who had somehow broken through 3,000 years of armor and loneliness. She closed her eyes. For a moment, she stood perfectly still, and Hannah wondered what a dragon queen would live so long and seen so much could possibly wish for. Then Queen Myri opened her eyes and blew gently. The flames extinguished instantly, leaving only wisps of smoke that smelled faintly of cinnamon and fireroot. The queen stood there, looking at the cake, and more tears fell from her eyes. But this time, she was smiling. "I wished," she said softly, breaking the rule about not telling, "to remember what it felt like to be alive rather than just surviving. To remember that I am more than a weapon, more than a warrior. That somewhere inside this ancient body is still the young dragon who once loved music and art and celebration." She picked up the cake carefully and used a claw to cut a piece. She tasted it, and her expression changed to one of surprise. "The thermal spices. You researched dragon dietary preferences. This is not just a human cake. You adapted it for my taste. I wanted you to actually enjoy it," Hannah said, "not just look at it." Queen Myri ate slowly, savoring each bite. When she finished, she looked at Jaiwin and Hannah with an expression that was no longer cold or distant. "In 3,000 years, I have received many gifts, weapons, territory, tribute from conquered worlds. But this simple cake, made by a child in a small repair station, is the most valuable gift I have ever been given. Do you know why?" Hannah shook her head. "Because it was given without expectation," the queen explained. "You did not make this cake to gain favor or to ask for something in return. You made it because you believed I deserved celebration simply for existing. That is a gift beyond price." She moved to the door of the command chamber and opened it. The crew members who had been waiting outside looked up in surprise. "Commander Dohayan," the queen called. "Enter." All senior officers enter now. Within moments, the command chamber filled with dragon warriors. They looked confused, concerned, seeing their queen with tears still on her face and two humans standing beside her. Commander Dohayan, the queen's second in command, stepped forward. He was a large dragon with copper-colored scales and eyes that had seen countless battles. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "is everything well? Should we remove the humans?" "Everything is well, old friend," Queen Myri said. She gestured to the cake on the table. "Better than it has been in a very long time. Tell me, Dohayan, do you know what day this is?" The commander looked confused. "It is the 17th day of the 9th cycle, Your Majesty. By human calendar, it would be—" "It is my 3,000 hatching day," the queen interrupted. "And this human child remembered when none of my own people did. She made me a birthday cake. She taught me to make a wish. She reminded me of traditions we abandoned so long ago that most of us have forgotten they ever existed." The dragons in the chamber looked at each other, uncomfortable and uncertain. One of the younger warriors, a female with silver scales, spoke up hesitantly. "Your Majesty, the old traditions were abandoned because they made us weak. They distracted us from our duty." "Did they?" Queen Myri challenged. "Or did we tell ourselves that because it was easier than admitting we had lost something precious? Look at this cake. Look at the thought and care that went into it. This child used her limited resources, researched our preferences, and created something beautiful for a queen she had no reason to care about. Tell me, when did any of us last create something purely to bring joy to another?" The chamber was silent. The dragons shifted uncomfortably, but Hannah could see that the queen's words were affecting them. Some of the older warriors had distant looks in their eyes, as if remembering something from long ago. "I have fought for 3,000 years," Queen Myri continued, her voice growing stronger. "I have been victorious in countless battles. I have commanded fleets and conquered systems. But in all that time, I have forgotten the most important thing. I have forgotten why we fight, why we survive, It is not to simply exist as weapons. It is to live, to experience joy and celebration and connection. She picked up the remaining cake and held it out to her crew. This human mechanic and his daughter have taught me something today. They have shown me that strength and joy are not opposites, that celebrating life does not make us weak. It reminds us what we are fighting to preserve. Commander Dohine approached slowly. He looked at the cake, then at his queen, then at Hannah. Your Majesty, if this is truly your hatching day, then I have failed in my duty. I should have remembered. We all should have. You were not taught to remember such things, the queen said gently. We were all taught to forget, but perhaps it is time to remember again. She broke off pieces of the cake and handed them to her officers. At first, they were hesitant, but at their queen's encouraging nod, they tasted it. Hannah watched their expressions change. Some looked surprised at the flavor. Others looked sad, as if the act of eating birthday cake had awakened old memories they had buried. The silver-scale warrior who had spoken earlier tasted her piece and suddenly sat down on the floor, tears streaming down her face. I remember, she whispered. I remember my hatching day. My mother made me thermal crystals that sparkled. There was music. I had forgotten. I had completely forgotten. Other dragons began to share memories, speaking quietly among themselves. They talked about celebrations from before the Great War, about traditions and festivals, and simple joys they had abandoned in the name of survival and strength. Queen Myri watched her crew reconnecting with lost parts of themselves, and she turned to Jywin and Hannah. You have given me more than a cake today. You have given me back something I thought was lost forever, the memory that I am more than what the war made me. She knelt again, bringing herself to eye level with Hannah. I wish to honor you for this gift. What would you ask of me? Small one. What reward could possibly be appropriate? Hannah thought for a moment, then smiled. Could you teach us about your culture? The real culture from before the wars? My papa and I love learning about different people. And maybe if humans knew more about dragons beyond just the warrior stories, we could be friends. Queen Myri laughed again, and this time it sounded more natural, more free. Friends. A dragon queen and a mechanic's daughter. The galaxy would think us both mad. She stood and placed a hand on Hannah's shoulder, a gesture of respect among dragons. But perhaps the galaxy needs a bit of madness. Yes, child, I will teach you about my people. And in return, you will teach me more about these human traditions that seem to hold such power. Word spread quickly through the dragon fleet. What had happened aboard the Eternal Flame was unprecedented, shocking, and for many dragons, deeply uncomfortable. Queen Myri had shared a birthday cake with humans. She had cried. She had spoken of joy and celebration, and traditions that were supposed to be forgotten. Some dragon commanders were outraged. They sent messages demanding explanations, calling the queen's behavior inappropriate and weak. How could she show such vulnerability before lesser species? How could she acknowledge something as frivolous as a birthday during their ongoing struggles? But Queen Myri did something that shocked them even more. She recorded a message and broadcast across all dragon communication channels, from the smallest patrol ship to the largest battle cruiser. Jywin and Hannah watched from the repair station as the queen stood before the cameras in her full dragon form, magnificent and powerful, but with eyes that held warmth instead of coldness. I am Queen Myri, commander of the Eastern Fleet, she began, her voice carrying the authority of 3,000 years. Today, I celebrated my hatching day for the first time in 3 millennia. A human child, a mechanic's daughter named Hannah, made me a birthday cake because she believed I deserved to be celebrated simply for existing. And she was right. The message continued as the queen spoke about what had been lost. We transformed ourselves into perfect weapons, she said. We told ourselves that celebration was weakness, that joy was a distraction, that traditions were unnecessary. We fought for so long that we forgot why we were fighting. We survived, but we stopped living. I ask you all now, what is the point of winning every battle if we lose ourselves in the process? She showed the empty cake container, the metal flakes still glinting. This simple gift from a species we once considered beneath us has taught me more about strength than any battle I have won. True strength is not forgetting how to feel joy. True strength is holding on to what makes life worth living, even in the hardest times. The humans do this. They are fragile and short-lived, yet they celebrate every birthday, every small victory, every moment of connection. Perhaps that is why they have thrived despite having no natural advantages. The message ended with Queen Myri making an announcement that would change galactic politics forever. I hereby declare an honor bond with humanity, specifically with the family of Jaiwan and Hannah of the Neutral Zone Repair Station. This is the first honor bond the dragon people have made with another species in recorded history. Let this be the beginning of something new. Let us remember how to live while we fight. Let us reclaim what we lost. The response was immediate and intense. Some dragon fleets celebrated, their younger members excited by the possibility of reconnecting with their forgotten culture. Others were furious, seeing it as a betrayal of everything dragons had become. The galaxy watched in amazement as the most feared warrior race in known space began to fracture over the question of birthday cake and celebration. In the weeks that followed, the small repair station became the center of unexpected attention. Queen Myri returned frequently, bringing scholars and historians who wanted to learn about human traditions. Hannah taught them about birthdays, holidays, and festivals. She showed them videos of human celebrations, explained the importance of marking important moments, and talked about how humans use joy as a tool for survival rather than seeing it as weakness. Jaiwan found himself hosting dragon engineers who wanted to learn his approach to repairs and modifications. They were amazed by human adaptability, by the way humans could take something broken and make it better rather than simply restoring it to its original state. You treat machines like living things that can grow, one engineer said with wonder. We treat them like weapons that must never change. But the most profound changes happened within the dragon community itself. Older dragons began sharing memories of life before the Great War. They spoke of festivals where entire fleets would gather not for battle, but for music and art. They remembered hatching day celebrations where young dragons were welcomed with joy rather than immediately trained for combat. They talked about traditions of storytelling, of creating beautiful things, of taking time to simply exist rather than always preparing for the next fight. The silver-scaled warrior from Queen Myri's crew, whose name was Suki, became a regular visitor to the station. She had been deeply affected by the birthday cake, and she spent hours talking with Hannah about the memories it had awakened. I was hatched 2,000 years ago, Suki told Hannah one day. My mother sang to me when I emerged from my egg. I had forgotten that completely. I forgot that dragons once sang. Can you still sing? Hannah asked. Suki looked uncertain, almost afraid. I have not tried in centuries. What if I have forgotten how? Then I'll teach you human songs, and you can teach me dragon songs when you remember them. Hannah offered. And so, in a small repair station in the neutral zone, a dragon warrior and a human child sang together. Suki's voice was rough at first, but as she relaxed, it became beautiful and haunting. Other dragons heard her and remembered that they, too, had once made music. Slowly, carefully, they began to reclaim pieces of themselves they thought were lost forever. Not everyone approved. A faction of traditional dragon warriors, led by a commander named Tamine, declared that Queen Myri had become weak and unfit to lead. They challenged her authority, claiming that humans had corrupted her with their soft philosophies. They demanded that the honor bond be broken and that dragons return to their pure warrior nature. Queen Myri faced this challenge not with anger, but with sadness. She met Commander Tamine in a formal debate before the Dragon Council, and Hannah watched the broadcast with her father, worried for their friend. You say I have become weak, Queen Myri said to Tamine. But answer me this. In 3,000 years of perfect warfare, what have we actually won? We are still fighting. We are still losing members of our fleets. We have become so efficient at survival that we forgot what we were surviving for. I am not asking us to stop being warriors. I am asking us to remember that we are also living beings who deserve more than endless battle. Tamine stood firm. Our strength comes from our single-minded focus. Celebration and tradition will distract us, make us vulnerable. Will it? Queen Myri challenged. Or will remembering what we fight for make us stronger? The humans are weaker than us in every physical measure, yet they have thrived. Why? because they hold on to joy even in darkness, because they celebrate life even when it's hard, because they remember that survival without meaning is just slow death. The debate continued for hours, but in the end, the council sided with Queen Myri, though not unanimously. The honor bond would stand. Dragons would be permitted to explore their old traditions if they wished, though no one would be forced to participate. 1 year later, on the anniversary of that first cake, something extraordinary happened. Queen Myri returned to the repair station, but she did not come alone. Behind her ship came dozens of others, from young dragons who had never known peace to ancient ones who remembered the festivals of old. Hannah had prepared for this. With her father's help and with supplies donated by humans across the sector who had heard the story, she had created